Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at the Steel Will Sedge. This is a fairly recent model from Steel Will. I did do a first impressions on it a little while back, and I wanted to share a little further information on this in the form of a full review now that I've spent some time with this and been able to carry it and cut stuff with it and all that kind of good stuff. So let's go ahead and get into this. First of all, before we do that, again, I will acknowledge the very cool new background from Real Bush Monkey EDC over on Instagram, or Scott Riley if you know him on Facebook or somewhere else. Really, really cool. I'm liking this background a lot. I will say the lighting washes out this one portion, but I'm kind of playing with the lighting, trying to find the best way to do this. And over time, I'm sure I'll figure it out so it'll look a little cooler overall eventually. So let's get back to the knife. This is a pretty interesting knife to me. It's definitely a large, slim knife. You guys know I like the bigger knives. Lots and lots of blade here. So this is a knife that's pretty compelling to me, and I suspect will be to some of you. It's going to be an interesting discussion when we get to the comparisons, because this lands in a difficult spot to sort of characterize, and the value discussion here is admittedly a little tough, but we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. I will say by way of introduction that I am a bit of a Steel Will fan. They have quite a few models out that I find rather compelling. The Gecko, which has been around for a long time, the Tasso, which I think is really, really cool and a nearly perfect EDC, the F15, the Piercer, Cutjack, so there's lots of good Steel Will models. They have recently sort of really hit the gas in terms of producing a bunch of different models. And I haven't been crazy about all of them, but they have certainly got a few that I think stand out as being a little bit unique and special. And the question becomes, is this just another in a long string of models, hoping that out of a bunch of them, a few kind of work out really well? Or does this one stand out from the crowd in some significant ways? And I'm sort of back and forth on that view, and hopefully you'll be able to make up your mind as we work our way through here and I tell you a bit about this knife. So overall size on this is 9 inches. So this is a large knife, 4 inches of blade, 4 inches of cutting edge, I guess minus a little bit for that sharpening choil. 5/16 on the 5 1/16 on the handle. Okay, so that's this length, just a hair over 5 inches. 4 inches of grip area, so tons and tons of room there. And then finally, this whole giant package weighs in at only 4.2 ounces, which for a 9-inch knife is actually really, really good. So large, slim folder, fairly easy to carry, and you're carrying a very substantial knife. So if you have need of that, you've got tons of cutting edge, you've got something, as I say, that's quite substantial, but you're not toting around all that much. Okay, so I think from a size and weight standpoint, this is really a win. This is not much of a pocket hog. In fact, it carries very minimally, and yet you have a very, very capable cutting tool when you need it. Okay, so as far as that goes, I think that is a standout feature of the knife. Just slimness and length really makes for an efficient carry. Moving on to the blade, we've got a D2 drop point blade with a satin finish, top swedge, which is kind of a nicely done little feature here, but not overly aggressive. Got that nice distal taper on that blade, making this very, very slim, very pointed blade here. Now, I will say one thing that always comes along with that is this is not a knife you're going to want to drop or try to throw or pry with at all. Okay, this is a very slim blade, meaning you're going to have to pay a little bit of attention to what you're doing with it. I will say I like the satin finish. If you're going to go with D2, you should be going with satin just to reduce the potential for rust. D2 is not a fully stainless steel, so you're going to have to take care of it if you don't want it to rust. I will say as well that they've done a nice job with the grind here. This is pretty thin. I've gunked this up with my fingers a little bit, but nice thin edge, high flat grind, thin blade stock. So this does slice really, really well. And overall, my thoughts on this blade are very positive. D2 steel is going to be great for edge retention. As I say, you're sacrificing a little in terms of corrosion resistance, but if you take care of it, it's absolutely fine. And so, yeah, do I like this blade? I do. I like this blade an awful lot. I will qualify that in this way, though. I don't always want something quite this slim, right? This is a very thin, almost kitchen style blade. And I've said before on the channel, and I'll say it again, I use kitchen knives for kitchen stuff. For EDC, I generally like something just a little more substantial. And I think a good middle ground isn't the example is the Feldspar, where it's still pretty slim, it still cuts nicely, but there's a little more blade stock here, and that little bit of a flat portion gives it some more heft. So this is going to be a slightly more robust blade, just to give you an idea. Another good example would be the Recon 1, where again you've got a pretty long slim blade and this cuts really well, but there's just the approach that they've taken here still delivers a pretty fine point, but gives me a little more strength and just a little more robustness in that blade, which I definitely appreciate. As I say, it's not necessary, and I've carried this a lot and I like it a lot. You just have to be aware of what your particular uses are going to be. All right, so that's the blade. Definitely a win. By the way, if you're one of those people, and I know there's some out there who do a lot of kitchen stuff with your knife, this is going to be a huge win for you. This thing slices like crazy. And in fact, if you ever go to, if you're going somewhere where you're going to have to do some slicing and you're not confident about the kitchen tools wherever you're going, this is a great option because it really can replace a kitchen knife. It's got that much blade length and it's really ground like a kitchen knife. Okay, back to the knife itself, lockup and deployment. We have a liner lock. Okay, I think everyone who's even watching this for the first 2 seconds knows that. And you might be able to catch a glimpse of the bronze washers in there. Maybe not. I don't know. From here, from my perspective, I can actually see them pretty easily, but I just can't get it to show up right on camera. You're going to have to take my word for it. Is it drop shut? No, not really. Right, you're going to have to close it this way. The deployment hole works well for either a thumb deployment or a spider flick, so I do appreciate that. And so it's not, the slickest, drop shutty bearing deployment ever, but it's still very capable. And in terms of a folding cutting knife, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, folding pocket knife, to do cutting tasks, it's absolutely great, right? I like good action as much as the next guy, but as a reviewer, I really try hard not to make that a big priority because frankly, it doesn't add anything to the functionality of the knife. So this one is totally adequate. The thumb stud is very accessible. You can see that I can get a decent grip on it. Now I did debate back and forth about how I would talk about one thing. There's a bit of an edge here on this hole. It's not uncomfortably sharp, and I'm of two minds about it. So I like it being just a little bit sharp because I want this thing to catch my thumb. And I have had knives and complained about knives where they've chamfered this hole and now I can't get good traction on it. So I don't like to actually see chamfering, but maybe a little bit of buffing or something on this to clean up the edge. A tiny bit would be appreciated. That said, it's not uncomfortable. It's just something I kind of notice whenever I deploy the knife. By the way, I also noticed the lock bar is very accessible, easy to use, and that's something that is a deal breaker for me. If I can't get my fingers on that lock bar, it really drives me crazy. All right, so from that perspective, I'm pretty happy with it. And so overall, do I like the lockup and deployment on this? Do I find the action, satisfying? Yeah, for sure. It flicks out really quickly. It's reliable. It's smooth. It's fast. There's not much that I could look for other than the things that it delivers. Now, let's move on to the rest of the components of the handle. Really, we've only talked about this little piece here. The rest of the handle, we've got contoured G10 with a little bit of an extra cut all around the edge. Really nice blue aluminum backspacer to add like a bit of a pop of color there. Pocket clip is not deep carry. It is reversible to left or right side tip up carry, and it works just fine. I have no problem with this bent clip. It does ship with 2 clips because you can see, right, if you move this over, it's not going to work. So it does come with of course the other clip. Lanyard hole is incorporated back here, and that's sort of, I don't mind the way they've done it. It doesn't really take away from the knife. That's a complaint of mine. I don't want a lanyard on my knife. I don't use them, so I don't want to see the lanyard hole interfering with the design. I know for you guys who are big on lanyards, you may disagree with me, but this one is done the way I like to see them. Finally, the ergonomics on this. Oh yeah, I guess I should point out they're nested steel liners in here on both sides, and I think they've done a really good job. Those steel liners would add weight, but it's just a hair over 4 ounces for a 9-inch knife. So they've done a really, really good job keeping this nice and lightweight. Okay, so next thing to talk about is ergonomics. Now I will say the only ergonomic miss on this, it's very comfortable. I love the Contour G10. It's great in a hammer grip, in a saber grip. The only thing that makes me kind of scratch my head is this jimping right here. They've sort of borrowed that Benchmade style of jimping, and although the handle's big enough to do it, so you could hold the knife like this, I never do. When I'm holding the knife, my thumb is up here, and so I'm totally missing that jimping. I guess if you were, using this for, a defensive weapon or something, you might keep back up a little bit to give yourself a little more reach, and then that jimping would come into play. By the way, it still works really well in a reverse grip or in sort of a draw cut grip. So I have no complaints. Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to get used to having a background that I can move around here. I've knocked it a couple of times, but so ergonomically, yeah, very, very good. So overall, I think you can see why I like this knife. The action is nice, the blade is nice, the ergonomics are really nice. So, there's really nothing that you can complain about here, and the design is pretty cool, and it's a little bit different. Now, I want to get to some comparisons, because that's where this gets a little tougher. If I want a knife of this size that's potentially, to be used in like a tactical situation or something like that, do I spend the extra $25 and go up to the Recon 1? Probably. Okay, the other knife to consider here that's going to be in a similar role, although slightly smaller, again, a little more robust in terms of the way they've designed this blade, would be the Rat Model 1. Now, by the way, the D2 with the sort of carbon fibery stuff here, I found a couple places selling this for like $70. So that's almost, this is 75, this is 70. Given that comparison, I'm going to go with the steel wheel because it's a little more comfortable in hand. And so if I'm using it for prolonged periods of time, I like that Contour G10. Again, going up for the extra $25 for a Recon 1, not this particular Recon 1, they cost a little bit more. But again, this is something that has to be considered in terms of, when I'm doing a comparison here. There are some other knives out there that you'd have to look at. The Feldspar is another one that I want to bring in, and there's 2 reasons I want to bring this in. So number one, the blade steel choice of D2, although it's fine and it's a good performing steel, it's almost become equated with budget knives now. So I feel like if your knife is is starting to even push that $100 price point. This is $75 and you're getting D2 steel, when there are knives out there for, 30 some dollars, under $40 with D2. D2 is a great steel, but I think, just the flood of D2 knives out there has kind of changed the way we associate it, right? Now I think in the community, we kind of think of it as a budget steel. And that, I think, creates a bit of a problem. Even if it's just a marketing problem, it's still a problem. I thought I would throw one other option in there, and that is the WE Knives 037. This, in recent years is one of the most interesting knives that has come out, because this knife does so many cool things. The blade is very thin and ground to perform. Anyway, this is an expensive knife, but I thought because we're looking at a long, lean, lightweight knife, I'd throw this guy in. We could do, we've done multiple videos on this knife. There are lots of reasons why I find it very compelling. Just wanted to throw it out there in case you're looking for something long and slim, but wanted to spend a little more money and get some higher end materials, as well as action and all that good stuff. So those are some of the comparisons. We could do more. I think the Enduro would be another good comparison, although, and this stacks up very favorably against the Enduro. I think, I spent some time online. Enduros are like $90. So, that would be, again, within $15 of this. But frankly, I like the ergonomics on this quite a bit more, and I like the styling on this. This is just an interesting knife. So, conclusion. Is this a good knife? Yes, very, very good knife. Is it, again, just to remind you, it's comfortable in hand, it's well put together, the blade is very functional and highly utility minded, especially if you do a lot of cutting tasks, slicing tasks. So all of that stuff is great. The design, I think, is really cool and a little bit different than a lot of the things that we see out there. So it also gives you that unique, that unique side of the equation that Steelwell tends to do a pretty good job with. They've got a few knives that I think are, highly competitive in the space that they land in the market, but then are just a little bit different to make them interesting. And this one, I think, is another example of that. So, is this the greatest, $70 knife or $75 knife that you could find out there? By the way, remember, if you go to Southern Edge Knife Works or White Mountain Knives, I can't promise that they'll have this in stock, but you could use my discount code and save yourself a little bit of money, moving this, I think just under $70. So that does definitely make it a little more compelling as well. So yeah, do I recommend this knife? Yes, I think this is a good knife. I recommend it. Is this like a must-have where, I would say whatever knife you're thinking of buying, just forget about it and buy this? No, it doesn't quite reach that level. It doesn't quite go to the level of, being, outstanding above everything else that's competitive with it, but it's very, very good. All right, so there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope that helps you in terms of your own thought process when you're looking at a knife. And, I've got to say, I appreciate what Steelwell is doing. They could probably be a little more discerning about which designs they put out. They put out a few that kind of have a weird, I don't want to say ugly, but, I'm sure some people just call them ugly. Some of the designs that they put out recently, I just don't get. This one certainly isn't that way. I find this one rather attractive. But there you go. That's my overall take on the Steelwell Sedge. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to check out those channel sponsors and use my discount code. That does help the channel a lot. Again, I'll thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.